Daniel in the Bible ate a whole food plant-based diet and was stronger and wiser for it. Daniel's plate was created because we wanted to show people that you can eat yummy, whole food plant-based dishes without having to mortgage your health. We wanted people to have plenty of options for delicious recipes that were Daniel Fast compliant. But we also wanted to show them that you can eat this way not just for 30 days, but it can actually be a long-term sustainable lifestyle. So whether you're doing the Daniel Fast or you want to eat healthier meals, Daniel's Plate is your eat better, not less, whole food plant-based recipe website that will inspire you to make healthy living a lifestyle.
Right. Welcome to Healthy for My Purpose. We have a wonderful guest, Jacque Salomon from Seeds to Inspire. And we're so excited to talk with her. She is going to be such a blessing for you. And we're just going to go ahead and jump to the chase and jump right in. Jacque, can you, let's just start by laying the foundation, because I think, as I listen to the mission of Seeds to Inspire, I feel like the foundation to it all starts with your powerful story. And I want you to kind of take your time and let the audience know your story, how this inspired you to do all the work that you're doing, so people could just get a sense of who you are and why you are who you are today in this space. So if you can go ahead and just let us know a little bit about your story.
Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm really, really pleased, and it warms my heart to be introduced to your community that you've worked so hard and so lovingly to cultivate. So thank you. And I appreciate all of you. I also would like to do a land acknowledgement and share with the your community that I have the privilege of living, working, and playing as an uninvited guest on the unceded ancestral home of the Akimaladum and Pipash people, which is more commonly known as Phoenix, Arizona. My story really starts with the day my son passed away. And that was in 2009, and he was 11 years old. And that was as a result of a severe allergic reaction to a pharmaceutical that was prescribed to him to help him with his depression and anxiety as a mood stabilizer. And within 10 days, he was in a medically induced coma in a burn unit. And these are one of the times where I didn't have space or energy for blame or anger. The grief was so intense that there was no space for anything else. And that was one of the ego deaths that I went through on my hero's journey to find myself. And no judgment, so much of my family were like, how are you not angry? How are you not? And it was just like, because I can barely have time and space to breathe outside of the grief. And so it was kind of understanding, like, why was that my response? Why wasn't I angry? What is this? And then learning how that I could still be the best mom that I could be for my son in the form that he was in spirit. And that I could do the years that he was with me. I could do justice to his life. And I could teach my twins that were only 7 years old at the time. That resilience gets us so far, but then it's time to take our healing to the next level to get through these tragedies. Because the ancestral way, the cultural way that my family dealt with the tragedy really revealed a lot of patterns that we'd have inherited and were not processed. So that's where really it started.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I'm so sorry for your loss. So tell us how this, like you said, you only had space for grief, but what did that evolve into? How did that blend into your sons, yourself, your own healing, your own health? How did all of that fuse into that from that sad point?
So from that point, I did everything that the doctors and mental health told me to do. I showed up for myself. I showed up for my children. I was working my way to get over it, quote unquote, over it. Um, and all that happened was that we all got chronically overweight. We became obese. The chronic diseases started manifesting. Diseases that when I was in childhood were old people diseases were manifesting inside of my body in my 30s. And what really propelled me was when the stress of the injustices that I was going through with the public school system and the discrimination against my boys, because they were all three of my boys learned differently. And so there were experiences that my sons were going through. So I had to take on this whole other career of becoming their special education advocate was a whole other stress level. And there was a diabetes, and there was a hypertension, and there was kidney disorder. And it got to the point that there were two different times that I almost lost my life and orphaned my children after everything that I went through because I was so sick and my body was so sick. And it was really not even that was enough. You know, that self-love and that pattern of health and self-care was not anything that I had ever experienced in my life. What's self-love? What's self-care? I didn't even know what those terms existed, what they look like. And so I was just, again, just judging forward with, 8 prescriptions, and everybody in my house had prescriptions, and nothing was getting better. We were just maintaining, and just getting heavier and dealing with the stress in such ways that were an antithesis to health. So dealing with stress by just being stagnant and just sitting there and not being able to move because I've used all my energy to fight the school system and fight this. So it was just that cycle. And I didn't know how to get out of it until my boys went in for their annuals and they were being diagnosed in their early teens and adolescence with these pre-diabetes, with high cholesterol, wanting to put my boys at 14 on statins. And that's when it was like, okay, what in the world is happening here? And just me being me and being like a lover of knowledge and words and research, it was like, yeah, there's something here and I got to figure this out because I'm fighting the school system here that's making me sick. The medical community is not telling me how to do anything better. They're just telling me how to maintain what I already have. And now it's going after my children. If I almost died, am I going to lose my babies? That's where everything started shifting. And I discovered the documentary Forks Over Knives. And it was literally within weeks, I had completely transitioned us. So in my journey, veganism came out of the social justice piece, and the health justice piece came out of me becoming that alchemist and that pharmacist in my home, utilizing food as medicine. And that's when we started reversing all of the chronic diseases. And then I said, oh, okay, why don't I know this? Why is this not available to me? And why is it that I can afford this? But what about my sisters and brothers that I don't? I grew up in the projects in New York City. I remember how I got this way. I remember what was on the lunch, in PS 134. I remember what it is like to go to the bodega and you're just getting your sandwiches, a slice of pizza, and quarter water. Yeah, I know how this got here. How do we talk about this and help this? And that's what the journey's been through Seeds.
Wow, that is so powerful. I mean, the fact that your kids were in a place where they were being diagnosed with diseases that historically have only impacted, people above 50, and 60 and 70. And even that is, some might say too young to be diagnosed with these diseases. But at that age, it's almost, kind of what's happening in our system really should be criminal, quite frankly, with the way things are set up. And I don't want to steal the thunder of what you're going to talk about with Seeds to Inspire, but maybe just help us unpack a little more about, how you started Seeds to Inspire.
Initially, I had this grand idea that I wanted to have a school for children that learn differently, that celebrates their neurodiversity, that celebrates their uniqueness, that creates an opportunity for self-driven, self-directed education, potential-driven education, and where children's voices are present and centered and they are growing food, and they're learning how to grow food, and they're learning how to be advocates and of health and truth and for the climate. And that's how it started. And then it was like, oh, okay, Jack, maybe you got to scale down a little bit. Scale. Where do we start here? And so we started the nonprofit, and I just started creating programming that was like, okay, how did I find out about this? I watched a documentary. So let's make certain we create spaces where people watch documentaries and have these conversations. How did I start? Well, then I had to bring the food to my family and make sure that they were like, okay, what's that? So they had to be able to, it had to be familiar. I had to taste close to what they were used to. It had to be simple because of our hectic lives. So that's how I started working that. Like, how do we show this to the community? So then we started doing workshops, and we started doing screenings, and always like a celebration with music. We had a DJ. We always had food so that people could taste the food. And I always wanted to like, how do I invite people to my virtual world of like a house party in my house? Like, I would have the salsa playing, I would have 70s because the OJ's going, I would have spread, and so I was wanting to replicate that experience in community. Also, because again, I'm new to Phoenix. We only moved here a year after my son earned his angel wings. And so I understand deeply that I am a visitor in someone else's home. There's a rich and deep community, historical community here that I am a visitor to. So I wanted to slowly introduce myself and be welcomed and invited into the community. And I love this community. I've been invited in, and now I get to really do my work because now we work in collaboration as an inviter, as an invited person into this beautiful community, but also as someone that is excited to collaborate, excited to do this work, excited to be able to bring our wisdom and match our wisdom with the work that you're already doing. You're working on healing, you're working on social justice. How do we support each other to get this work out?
Wow, that's awesome. And so you're new to Phoenix, and so you started this when you moved to Phoenix, is that right?
We started in 2018.
2018.
So
Okay.
I discovered whole food plant-based nutrition in September of 2016.
Uh-huh.
And never turned back. We went whole food plant-based, no oil, to reverse the chronic diseases. Um, and then in 2018 was like I could not do anything with this because I felt so good,
Uh-huh.
and the weight was coming off, and my diseases all reversed. That it was agonizing not to be able to be like, oh my gosh, you know what we could do? You know what we could do? Like, you don't have to live this way. Like, there's solutions, and there's joy, and there's such a peace in your heart when I know that when stress comes to me, my body's in the best shape possible to deal with that stress. And that stress is not going to knock me down. It's not going to activate my chronic, pain. It's not going to knock me out where I have to go back on medication, because my body is this temple that my spirit gets to walk on this earth.
Mm.
And I have a moral obligation to make certain that this temple is fine-tuned so that all of me gets to show up authentically and genuinely all the time.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, so true. That's powerful. Sersie, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I love that. I want to circle back a little bit because, I heard you say one time, and I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about this a little bit, just because I think sometimes we forget that our body is speaking to us because we've tone deafed ourselves to being comfortable with, well, my mom had high blood pressure, I'm just speaking for myself, my grandparents, or I'm supposed to gain weight, and so we kind of ignore it. But you said something powerful. I heard, I don't know where I heard you speak it, but you said you saw the obesity that showed up in your life as a gift because it showed you right away, because other things are dormant, things could take years that you don't know is happening, but it showed you right away that something was out of an alignment and that you needed to do something. And so I wanted you to speak to that, because how does Seeds to Inspire help other families and other people that are in your same situation see those signal signs and act on it? Like, how do you empower them? How do you move it from your experience to now empowering other people?
Oh, thank you for that question. Yes. And I know again that this is a sensitive topic. And when I speak about obesity, I speak about obesity as a chronic disease, and we need to destigmatize this idea of this extra weight is there for a reason. And my body loves me. And I did not know that. I was socialized to see my body in certain ways as more as a tool and something that I could utilize, I could either weaponize or be victimized in. But that was my relationship with my body. It was always protect, and shy away from any kind of engagement and always safety, safety. That's a trauma response. My body was always in a trauma response. Safe, not safe, safe, not safe, safe, not safe, constantly, constantly. And that cortisol is always flushing our bodies. And so does what does my body do with all those extra unbalanced hormones? All of that, when we're in our stress response, our immune system decreases. Our frontal lobe is not getting any oxygen or blood. Our muscles are activated so that we can, respond to the moment. How do we deal with that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? We're not sleeping. That just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And these are hormones, right? So our bodies are containing them. And what does my body do? She takes all of those and she creates an opportunity to store them away from my vital organs so that I can keep going, so that I can wake up every day and be there for my children, so I can show up for the people I care about. That's what my body was doing. And when I could see that, and I'm a writer, so I say everything in metaphor. So I'm like, when I could understand how my body was loving me and protecting me every day, she was like, I got you. Like, it's just hard for me, but I'll take this out of your body so those organs can keep functioning. You can keep doing that. There was this guilt that came over me that I was like, oh my gosh, and all this time I'm calling you such nasty names and I'm beating you up and I'm telling you that you're bad and you're shameful. And all this time you had my back. Now I'm going to have your back. I'm going to do for you what you've done for me all this year, and I'm going to take care of you. And so when we take back our stories and we bring the evidence and we bring the those lived experiences and we take back our stories, I think that's the most powerful thing. I believe in everyone's fight for life and vitality. Everyone wants to thrive. When you believe that and you give people the tools, you just know that they're going to do the best with them. So let's teach them what's actually happening in the body. I have a client that is in her early 40s that was diagnosed with MS. She had never even heard the term MS before. That's a crime, you know, that's an injustice. So part of what I do is I help people kind of like, let's go through a metaphor. This is what's happening inside of your body. This is what it looks like. Imagine this. So when you help people get into that storytelling state where they can see how these diseases manifest, how food affects us, how stress affects us, now that we're empowered to go, okay, I don't want that. I don't want that to happen. Oh, I can do something about it. That's the empowerment. Right. So it's providing the education, providing the tools and the support to say, okay, it's not going to be easy. Knowing is just not even half the battle. The main battle is, again, we're conditioned, we're socialized, and we've adapted to cultures of convenience. We've adapted to understanding that our mental health and our body are separate. So, how I found the ultimate health, and I tell people all the time, is like, I couldn't get psychologically healthy until I got physically healthy. Once my body was healthy, I could stand up to those stressors in my life and say, okay, I'm going to take a moment and breathe here because this is not going to take me out of my peace. So I'm going to walk away and I'm going to do some deep breathing. And I was able to do that. Why? Because my blood pressure was not shooting up and down, because my blood levels, my sugar levels were balanced, because I got a good night's sleep the night before. So when you empower people and understand that this is a beautiful cycle and it's not secular, it's more like a funnel. Like the more you understand and the more you know, the more you do, you just keep growing and growing, and it's contagious. So I'm hoping that everybody can take this step and learn that with support we could do this. And that's why I love coaching, because I love finding the tools that people already have. We've all tried to make the best choices that we have. You've done this before, maybe not in this space, in this capacity, but you have succeeded and you have done your best in situations. So let's go back and find all those pieces and put them back together, and we could do this too.
Yeah, I love that. When you were talking, you reminded me of a movie that I watched. I think it was back in the early 2000s called The Usual Suspects with Kevin Spacey. And at the end of the movie, Kevin Spacey walks out and he gets in the car. And as the police detective, is drinking his cup of coffee, all of a sudden he's looking around the room and seeing all the pieces fit together. And oh, that was the guy. And so it's kind of like, I feel like when you start to expose people to the reality of what's happening to them and why things are the way they are, how they got that way, they have that moment where it's like the light bulb goes off, like, wow, I've been in this system, that's been, kind of set up to basically destroy me, but in a slow way. So it's kind of like, you don't really know what's happening to you. It's not a very abrupt, acute situation. It's just like it's like the I don't know if it's a story or what, where, you put a frog into a pot with water and then just slowly heat it up, versus putting a frog in boiling water where they jump in and jump out. It's like, ooh, it's too hot, I got to get out. Whereas you put them in the lukewarm water or the cold water, they just kind of sit there and they don't see any problem until it's too late. And so, I'm sure in the course of what you've been doing with Seeds to Inspire, you've seen some inequities, you've seen some personal kind of injustices. Do you want to share any specific examples, that, of course, not naming names, but any specific, inequalities that you witnessed?
So two come to mind. One is with my son. I consider myself an Indigenous woman. People will refer to me as Latina or Hispanic. I consider myself an Indigenous woman. And I code some of the lightest in my family. So my son was beautifully, beautifully caramelated and beautifully hued and had his beautiful curly hair. And I wonder if what we experienced and how long he was allowed to suffer. What conditions created those decisions and those choices, despite the cries of the people around him to make other decisions? My grandmother passed away the week before my twins were born. Her intestine exploded from chronic constipation, and she had visited 2 emergency rooms the day before and was sent home. My sister, my best friend, we share a life, has MS. All of my siblings, shy of 1, and there's 5 of us, all have some form of autoimmune. What is that about? Why are we not talking about this? Yes, there's health disparities, there's health inequities, but what happens to the health inequities before you even get to the white coats and the doctor's offices? Why don't we understand, and this is why I'm so passionate about understanding how stress affects our health, specifically interpersonal stress. To me, that's a pandemic that nobody's talking about, is the understanding how your social relationships truly, truly impact your health. And to watch my sister, who had dedicated her life as an older sister to her siblings, to watch her so young have to go on disability and watch her struggle through these extreme heats and with her MS, and she's only just turned 55. That's what fuels me to educate people on those health inequities, those topics that we're not discussing and talking about, because I know very, very well the connection between stress and disease. And I see very clearly how our trauma, our unprocessed trauma, how it brings in that ancestral trauma, how it comes into our families and our workspaces and interferes with our ability to be ourselves, to do our work, and live in a safe space of love. That really, truly affects our health. And we don't talk about that enough. So I focus on food as medicine, and I focus on that interpersonal stress to make sure that we understand that who we love and who we share to be, who we choose to be vulnerable with and be in our personal spaces truly does impact whether or not we thrive.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, because when you change what's on the end of your fork, you start to take part of the equation and you're changing it, because your food and stress kind of go hand in hand, and it could work for you or it could work against you, right? Stress can basically create, eating foods that aren't good for you, right? And then you just have this cycle, and then you get sick, and then you have stress around that sickness, or you can't handle the stress. You mentioned earlier, and Sersie and I have both shared this as well in the past, that, we're able to stand up to stress better when we take care of ourselves, and so it's this cycle. So when you interrupt that cycle with changing your food, you're then able to manage the stress in a different way, and chip away at it. And then on top of that, you start to take yourself out of the equation to a degree. I mean, you can't separate from it fully, of the inequities in our healthcare system, because you're basically saying, I'm going to treat my body as a temple. I'm using food as medicine, therefore, I'm going to prevent or reverse whatever chronic disease and not have to go into the system to get it managed or treated. And so you inherently develop this sense of, empowerment and autonomy just by changing what's at the end of your fork and being able to show up into stressful situations a whole lot differently than you maybe would if you were not taking care of your temple.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a principle that what heals kills and what kills heals. So we look at the principles of nature and how she functions. That's a principle that applies here. And we also have to understand like how I prepare with life is I prepare 80% and know that 20% of life is just going to come to me, and I have to be able to flow with it. And so that's, I see it. That's the metaphor I use. Like, okay, how can I prepare myself the best and do everything I can so that when life comes at me, I could just go with the waves and I can flow and I can figure it out. And how I can do that is to make certain that my microbiome is nice and healthy and balanced. I can make sure that my veins are flowing, that blood is flowing and it's pure, and it's light filled with health and vitality, and there's nothing harmful flowing through my veins, and that's fueling my brain and my muscles, right? So my body can feel its best because I'm providing the nutrients that are create this beautiful garden where all of the best of me is going to show up. And then all the pieces of me that no longer serve me, they become like compost. So the rest of me can continue to grow, you know? And so I look at that like, okay, so what am I inviting into my body? What am I nourishing my brain with by the things that I hear and watch? Who's in my space? Because that's nourishment. And then what am I putting, in my mouth? Is it the best quality, the highest frequency? Do they have lots of colors? Or is it a consequence of a being that was suffering and that was imprisoned and that was tortured? Am I consuming that? And is that what's fueling me epigenetically? And again, if I think about, I'm inviting that suffering because that's an experience, those are facts. We can't deny that this is the experience of the animals. And so I'm inviting that. And then I expect to deal with the anger and rage that I'm having at work, that the disappointment of the school system, then I got to go fight that board meeting tomorrow. My boss is driving me crazy. How am I supposed to be able to manage that if I'm inviting that trauma in my body all the time? So I really wanted to look at like, what am I putting in? What are these building blocks epigenetically again that my cells get to interact with? And when you look at it like that, like, okay, what am I putting in? Is it nutrients? Or is it poison? Is it toxins that I'm putting in for my cells to grow in? And then you think about, oh my goodness, so when my brain is functioning great and sparking, so all that electricity is flowing, yeah, you become the best self. And then you're like, okay, I can respond. And that's very different from reacting. We want to entrain our bodies to be responsive and responsible and not reactionary, reactive. And that can't happen when you have all these medications in your body, when you're taking 14 prescriptions, you haven't slept in 3 nights. Goodness, I'm in menopausal stage. So if that's on top of me again, so like, so when we do our best, now we can, confront life on better terms.
Yeah, so true. Because you're really stacking the odds in your favor. There's never any guarantees, but you want to do what you can do to position yourself in the best way. And love that.
Yeah. So, another question, I guess, before we wrap it up, but what you're saying is, how do you help shift the mindset? Because I think inherently in what you're saying, people have to believe that the body can heal itself, that what we put in our mouths can actually help our body to function and heal some of the things that we were so used to being dependent on pharmaceuticals. When the doctor writes that prescription, you have so much faith in that thing to work, but we have lost our way when it comes with food. And so how do you help people recreate a new narrative around food being medicine? Because we've been, conditioned around pharmaceuticals being medicine and food being maybe for pleasure or maybe just for fun. And we've lost the real, issue around that.
I speak because the testimony is powerful. We belong to one another, and we have forgotten that. We're one family. And when I look through the lens of this is a family reunion and you're just long lost cousins that I have not met yet, let me tell you about what I experienced. Let me tell you about what happened to me. You know, I'm not out here to change anyone. I'm not out here trying to influence anyone. I'm here to inspire your own self-driven motivation and testimony of the fact that I was on prescriptions. I had tons of prescriptions. Yeah, I didn't get the heart attack yet. I didn't get the stroke yet. And that's what those prescriptions were doing for me. But I had no quality of life. I was shameful. I couldn't do anything with my kids, couldn't fit on rides. So everything about my health was the way I looked. But when you realize that I can go into that kitchen and I can make a beautiful, delicious, fragrant meal that is in honor of my culture and my ancestors, that I can go back to the basics and it tastes delicious and it smells delicious, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, it's not so bad. A little bit about that. So I make certain that I'm not challenging anyone's beliefs, that we're meeting you where you are, and that we're inspiring your vision of health. Everyone has a dream, and some people have lost hope and the possibilities that this is not ever going to go away. I have no chronic diseases. I have no chronic pain. I am 52 years old and I live with no pain, no diseases, and I had a slew of them. I'm on no pharmaceuticals. I lost 164 pounds through food as medicine, through yoga, through meditation, through self-love, and through making certain that I was in relationships that treated me dignified and a respect and honor that I deserve. And in reciprocity, I give that back to my community. So when you help people see that they deserve that self-love, that they deserve to be their best, that it can happen, and look, it's happened. How can I help you? That's how we create that in other people. As we teach people, we meet them where you are, no judgment, and you give them the testimony and the choice to be their best. And then we just help them do it in their way, through community, through engagement, and reminding people that this is trust. You have to trust me. You have to trust these changes. It's not going to be easy. But when we're reminded that we're a family and that we're doing this together, that trust builds into that self-trust that, yeah, I can do this. And now it's not a possibility, that's a probability. And what's next? Actualization.
I love that, changing within a community, because I think we live in a culture, especially when you talk about health culture or dieting culture, that culture has, it's very individualized. And so what I hear you saying, which I think is the is opposite to that model, is that you don't have to change in isolation. You can change in community. We learn from each other, we support each other. Whereas I think so many of us have been trained in a diet culture where we're just looking for the next diet online, and we're struggling on our own. Changing in community. I love that. I love that.
Oh, absolutely. And I may add that that's why I started transitioning my private practice from individual coaching to group coaching, because that's the piece that we're so missing is connection. It's connection. And I, as a coach, I have a certain experience, and you, as a client, you have another experience. But when you have people come together and share those experiences, there's a community wisdom that becomes present. And that's an energy that we can tap into and a knowledge base that we can tap into. So the power of community and connection is so, so important.
Fantastic. So tell our audience like how they can plug into the resources you provide, and where they can find you.
Well, we're on social media, so they can always reach out to us on our Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. People are always reaching out. You can email us at contact@ceasetoinspire.org. If you're interested in coaching, you can contact me at my private practice at angelinthestone@gmail.com. And also, we have a fundraiser going on. So we really want to have these major events where we're showcasing with fun and party and celebration what health really looks like and can be like. So please contribute to our fundraiser and make sure we can continue to do our work. We have webinars that we're launching. We have actually one going on tomorrow. And then we have a series going on with Dr. Davis in July, having these conversations and going deeper. So support us, like us, share our work, participate, and join the community. We need volunteers and we need people to spread this. And please invite us to collaborate, invite us to come and talk. And let's make certain that we bring a program into your organization to prevent burnout and make sure that you can continue to do your work out there.
Oh, love that. Okay, we'll definitely put all that into the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us, Jacque. It was an absolute pleasure and delight to meet you over Zoom. Hopefully we'll meet in person one of these days. But really love the work that you're doing and how you're just making the world a better place.
Oh, thank you. We're all doing it. It's one giant network and we're all doing it together. So thank you again for having me, and thank you for doing this for the community.